Hi, this is Dr. Sana Hashmi, and this week in my Print's Eye on China column, I analyze the discourse in China surrounding the US presidential election campaign that is attracting the global attention, as it will have lasting repercussions on countries around the globe. Of all the countries, China is looking at the election closely, and perhaps China will be the most impacted by its result. While the Chinese Foreign Ministry refrained from commenting on developments, including the President Joe Biden's dropping out of the election race as an internal matter of the US, Chinese media and social media platforms are abuzz with the intense debate on the US elections. Of course, it is primarily because of the significance of the US China relations and the outcome of the election on the US China relations. But also, one of the major reasons for the attention that it is getting in China is the popularity of former President Donald Trump, even among the Chinese social media users, the strategic community. So, it's interesting to see how the US election campaign is generating this extensive discussion around across Chinese media and social media platforms. And if we look at the Chinese news websites, WeChat or even Weibo, it seems it is their own elections rather than the American. There's so much discussion. There is so many theories about what's happening with respect to the Donald Trump or Joe Biden dropping out of the election race. So, for example, Biden dropping out of the election race generated a lot of interest and discussion, primarily about his health and about Vice President Kamala Harris' nomination. So, several Chinese observers believe that Biden's exit will be a huge setback for the Democrat despite his deteriorating health, and that Harris lacks the popularity and charisma that Biden had, and that might impact her winning chances. While she has advantages such as age on her side, she lacks certain advantages like connections in the Rust Belt and even being white male. This is a common argument that we are seeing against her on Chinese social media. Then, what I also found interesting is that there's a lot of praise for Donald Trump among Chinese observers and social media users, particularly after the assassination attempt against him. And many believe that he stands a better chance of winning than Harris now, specifically after the assassination attempt. Then some have also analyzed the voting pattern of the US citizens. There's a belief among Chinese commentators that the voters in the US are voting on the basis of their perception and feeling toward Trump. They're either pro Trump or anti Trump voters. Even those who are voting for the Democrats, they aren't really Democrat supporters. So the idea is that this is the contest between the lovers, admirers, or haters of Trump. And this is something that I found very interesting on the Chinese social media. Then there is also a substantial discussion on Trump's assassination attempt about the authenticity of it. Um, Lee Chung, a professor at the University of Hong Kong, opined that the media and the PR team of Trump will capitalize on this assassination attempt to project that he is the greatest president in the history of the US. But then instead of this objective of reunifying the American society and swaying the voters to vote for Trump, he believes that this will further lead to divisions and could also lead to more political violence as it has been seen in the past. Then there is an intense debate regarding the authenticity of the assassination attempt itself. Many in China strongly believe that it was not staged, primarily because it would have been too huge a risk for Trump when his popularity was already growing. But there's also this argument that regardless of its authenticity, Trump has strategically capitalized this assassination attempt and the powerful image of him raising his fist after the attempt while bleeding will definitely bolster his popularity. Then, many on Chinese social media also believe that the assassination attempt has shaped the positive perception of many voters in the US. And he has been successful enough in solidifying his image as a symbol of American uh, resilience, solidarity, and reinforcing the idea that his survival reflects a blessing on America itself. And he is also trying to reinforce this idea that he's the only one who could make America great again. Then there is considerable debate about the prospective foreign policy direction of the next US president. Several scholars suggest that if Harris becomes the next president, there will be more continuity and predictability in the US China policy. But if Trump comes back to power, he would maintain a tougher, harsher stance on China. His recent statements, including labeling China as the biggest threat to the US security, have definitely garnered a lot of attention on among Chinese strategic community and on the social media. Then, apart from his own ideas about China, remarks from his running mate JD Vance advocating for increased tariff on Chinese goods are also seen as a part of the Republican strategy to exert pressure on Chinese economy. And many believe that it is not going to be good for the US-China relations or even for the Chinese economy in times to come. Then the current discourse on the US election and intense emphasis on China within the election as well, it tells us that for China, the US remains the most important country and the US China relations remains the most significant relations for China. But even for the US as well, the rhetoric on China in the elections tells us volume about the use of China in the election. This is why we saw a hashtag trending on Weibo questioning the US that why it is using China as an election topic, as well as questioning that the US perhaps should stop dragging China in its election. So this is something that has been trending on Weibo. But the crux of the matter remains that no matter who wins in November, who emerges victorious, it will still be a rocky path for the US China relations. A Trump victory would mean more tariffs and economic challenges for China, for US China relations. But a Harris victory could also indicate a continuation of his policy, specifically with respect to Taiwan, that diverge from Chinese interest. So the idea on the Chinese social media among the scholars is that regardless who becomes the next president of the US, normalization of US-China relations, it will be very challenging for the Chinese as well as the US leadership. But this extensive discussion on the US election in China is a telltale sign of the critical importance of the US and its approach towards China in Chinese strategic thinking as well as media discourse. Thank you and see you next week.